Welcome to Abby Clubhouse with a review of the Bandai high-grade 1144 Gouf Flight Type, and yes, this is a classic high-grade kit from 1998, and this is a companion review to the newer HGUC kit, which has its own review, links in the description. So yes, the entire 8th MST model kit line in the 90s were sold under the high-grade line, which is when the line was shifted back into the 1144 scale. Now for a good few years during the G Gundam and the Gundam Wing and the Gundam X days, all the HG kits were 1100. And these 8th MS Team kits were released all the way up to the second half of 1998. So not even a year later, the HG line was changed into HGUC in May 1999, starting with the gun cannon. Now that isn't to say that these kits are at all related to the HGUC line, and in fact there's really nothing about these kits that were brought forward into HGUC. A simpler way to understand this is that these are the last kit to use Bandai's 1144 kit construction style from the 90s before it was completely overhauled. The high grade mostly applies to how they're pretty nicely colored and they aren't actually ultra budget kits. The Gouf Flight Type was released in July 1998, and it was already its second to last kit released in the line, with only the Jim Sniper coming after it in October of the same year. It sold for a price of 1,080 yen, and the box art is uncredited, but it looks like it was made by the animation staff, and it looks a lot like the artwork done by Koji Sugiura, which everyone remembers from the beautiful LD covers of the 8th MS Team. The box measures 29 by 19 by 7 centimeters, which is the norm for this line of kits. The short side of the box repeats all of the information from the front of the box. The other side is basically the same. The long side is actually very similar to what we see from HGUC kits with the layout and the text. And the other side is just a plug for the animation and other kits, and then it's all legal text. Inside the box, we get the Gouf Flight Type spread across 8 runners, with one of them being for the polycaps. My particular kit looks old, but it really isn't as old as you might think, and the date stamp says that it was made in January 2017, which is after they changed the materials for the soft parts from something they call AFX to just regular soft polystyrene. Now the AFX plastic, whatever the heck it is, it does not age well. We get a single sheet of foil stickers with some eye stickers here, with a choice of having the mono eye off to the 2 sides if you want, and then this red one here is made for the window of the cockpit, and the other 2 triangles are for each of the 2 sides. The big red ones here are for the vents on the front of the legs, and these big gray ones are for the cowl around it. The white strips are for the wings, with 2 of them for each wing. We also get a sheet of clear stickers with warning messages that's riddled with English, and they're way too big for the kits anyway. For the instructions, the center pages give us an overview of the weapons and the different parts of the MS, and the other page has just a tiny bit of info on the MS, and they only managed to get one screenshot of this goof right here because this was from episode 10, and it wouldn't be until episode 11 that we'd see a few seconds of this goof, and yeah, it really wasn't on screen much at all. The black and white side is all for assembly instructions, as you'd expect. You may have caught glimpses of this kit already from my other videos, but I think a lot of people today would be perfectly happy with how this kit's colored without any painting. And there are actually 3 colors here, with the light gray, and then this very dark gray, and this part on the chest is actually black. And unless you're going to paint any of these, this is the only version of the kit with the proper gray color scheme. The newer HGUC kit from P-Bandai is in a brown color, and then the Gundam Base exclusive one is in a bluish gray. And while we're praising the colors, you see the backside here? All the thrusters here are actually color separated. And check out this little cutout window with the black details peeking out. Or how about the vents underneath? I mean, all this stuff here is very fancy for a kit that really isn't all that expensive. But being an older kit means that there are seams all over the place. The shoulders and the arms aren't so bad to clean up, but the thighs actually have this trench on the side that they could have used to hide the seam. The ones on the legs here cut across some different geometry, so that's going to be an extra bit of work if you're going to sand it down, but all of this isn't so bad until you look at the feet. The feet don't actually look so bad until you look at it from a perspective of a painter. So this line cuts across the entire bottom of the feet, going across all of that raising and lowering geometry, and then, just to make your life miserable, it throws in a nasty mold line right here because there was a 3rd piece that made up this mold. That parting line cuts across all this detail to really test your tolerance for suffering. On the top side, that line just keeps going. Now, mercifully, that vent inside and that little platform right here, that's a separate part, so it isn't hit by the line. But the roof on top sure is, and I can hear all the builders whimpering in a fetal position at this point. Now that doesn't mean builders are gonna hate this kit. I mean, no. We actually like kits that need some work done by us, even if that process is painful. And I know there's like 1 or 2 of you guys already looking up where you can buy this kit. I mean, you're gonna buy it and you're gonna sand off all of this and you're gonna rebuild it yourself and you can't wait to do it. What I mean is, this kit is actually a fun project for builders with quite a lot of payoff. And that's a nice transition into the details, because this kit actually has a very simple 90s era construction. Everything is just 2 parts sandwiched together, but it still looks good enough that you might want to buy one even now, so how can that be? There's actually a lot of detail and geometry that's dotted all over, like on the chest here, which suggests that these 2 side panels go on top of a smaller inner section. This carries a lot of information about how the MS is put together from smaller panels and parts, when in fact the torso is just split along the front and the back with an extra piece on top, and then it's just the pipes. The complexity that you see is all decorative, and it's very much thanks to Hajime Katoki, who designed the Gouf Custom and the Flight Type. His signature style has his jigsaw-like armor panels and the blocky modular parts fit together, and as you pull further away, you'll see the sum of their shapes that'll turn into a leg or a torso. This is a very simple kit with very simple 90s construction, so it's mostly 2 pieces sandwiching 2 or so polycaps together, but the appearance carries a ton of information, and this is a masterclass for builders on how detail and complexity can be descriptive, and it's just not busy for busy sakes. And allow me to indulge a little bit and talk about how kits are molded, because the designers who made this kit are actually really amazing. So there are rules to how a kit can be molded, and I'm talking about just a basic 2-part mold, so it's a little bit like a waffle iron with a front and a back piece. Now you can go from a wide shape to a narrow shape, but you can never change back in between, so that means you can't go from a wide to a narrow shape and then wide again. This is true for most kits even today, so this leg piece is a perfect part for understanding this. The backside here starts off really wide, and then it gets more narrow as it goes up, and no part is wider than any part behind it. So even these little panels here are tilted forward, so nothing is overhanging anything like a chin if we look at it sideways like this. Now let's look at the torso. Take a second to look at all that geometry that Katoki threw into the design. This follows those same rules where nothing is ever wider than what comes before. So it all goes in one direction, but you'd never realize it from a casual glance. The older kits get trash talked a lot for being garbage, for having no part separation, but ironically that makes them unbelievably hard to make them look as nice as the Gouf here, because the designers had to figure out how to translate all of those complex shapes in the limits of a 2-part mold. Okay, I'm done geeking out. What I mean is I hope you can appreciate model designers and the work more with that little bit of knowledge. The 35mm Gatling gun is entirely static, so nothing on it moves, even though the scope looks a lot like it can. There's nothing particularly wrong with it, and it attaches onto the arm with a peg, and the arm has a polycap inside, so the gun stays on and it's not gonna rattle around at all. For the shield, they had to cheat a little bit, and this is a separate part from the entire one with the big Gatling gun on it, because this thing here is all stuck together and it can't be separated. The shield is a single black piece with nothing at all on the back, so just don't look here. It can go into the Gatling gun unit that we just saw with the hole in the back here. Now this is hard plastic on both ends and the grip is pretty tight, and it makes me anxious every time I try to pull them apart. But you do get this option of just having the plain shield, which on the newer HGUC kits you can't do, so how's that for a leg up? Okay, maybe it's not such a big deal because now the Gouf has no guns, or does it? Here's another thing that the HGUC kit doesn't have, a Gouf gun finger hand. Yes, Katoki went out of his way to fix the silly gun finger idea, and the designers basically vetoed his idea by restoring it. So all you have to do is just swap it into the forearm, and there you go, classic Gouf hands. The sword is stowed inside the full Gatling shield, and it can't be stored inside the smaller one. You can pull it out, and it's not actually smaller than the HGUC one. Well, maybe a little bit, but barely. Now this is a little bit weird, but the holding hand here is actually too narrow for the sword, so you need to use this special holding hand with a bigger hole to grip the sword. The hole is pretty big, and the sword just kind of bounces around like this, which kind of sucks. But you can use it to cheat a more tilted grip out of it when you pose it, but if you're playing with it, it's just going to be annoying all the time. And this default holding hand doesn't actually do anything because it has no other weapons to hold. Now you'd think if you have another kit like the Zaku 2, then the weapons can be given to this hand, but it can't hold any of those either, so actually it's useless. The Gatling shield we already know is one big thing, and once again, by size it's basically a match with the HGUC one, just that this one is all in black. Now if you're painting this, the front part here does come off, so it's not actually that hard to mask off the paint. The ammo belt on the back here is made from soft polystyrene, and I've mentioned at the start that if you have a really old version of this kit, it's probably going to be made from AFX and by now it's going to be really brittle, but more than likely it's not going to be a problem for you. To install it, the gun handle goes into the hand first, and then the shield goes on top of the small Gatling gun into that same hole in the back, and that's it. Thanks again to that polycap inside the arm, the gun is anchored really nicely into the forearm, but the poor elbow just kinda gives up and it can't hold the weight of the gun at all, if you don't reinforce the joint anyway. This is a known issue to all Gouf custom and all Gouf Flight Type kits in the series, so if you get one, you will encounter the same problem unfortunately. For the articulation, starting from the top, the head can only wiggle a little bit up and down. It can, however, turn a full circle even with its snout. The arms swing out about 45 degrees with the help of a swinging shoulder armor. It can swing a full circle if you move the arms out of the way of the wings, and those wings can't move unlike on the HGUC kit. The peg on the elbow handles the forearm rotation that gives us a full rotation. The elbow bends 90 degrees. The hands can swing up and down a little bit like this, and they can rotate a full circle along their peg. There is no waistband because the torso and the skirt armor are all fused together as one part. The wings on the side here do swing outwards. The legs can be adjusted on their ball joint, and they kick forward only about 45 degrees, and they go back barely at all. The knees manage to swing the gigantic lower legs a clean 90 degrees. This segment of the skirt on the leg can swivel like this, and the feet can be angled on their single ball joint however much the room will allow you to. This kit has a simple 90s construction, so it moves like that with mostly 90 or 45 degree bends, or none at all like the waist, so it's really not a whole lot. This guy is going to fly mostly in an upright pose or slightly tilted forward, so the articulation doesn't bother it a whole lot. But to be completely fair, it's still actually not that great, because the Zaku 2 actually has moving skirts, so even from the same classic HG line, the other kits pose a little better. 2 years later with the HGUC Gouf, Bandai's designers were still not able to solve all of the same challenges on this kit, unfortunately. For size comparisons, here's the lower end benchmark, the entry grade RX-78. And then here's the upper end benchmark, the high grade New Gundam. The Gouf is the exact standard height as the other 1-year war mobile suits, so it's not outrageously sized or anything. It's really wide and it fills up a lot of space, so you'll get the feeling that it makes up 2 of the RX-78 by volume. The New Gundam towers over both of the other MSs here, as you'd expect. And in case you were wondering, the Gatling shield is nearly as tall as the New Gundam. And of course, we want to see the Gouf Flight Type side by side with some more mobile suits, starting with the HGUC Ground Type Gundam. And then we have the HGUC Dom, just so you can see their gigantic legs together and how nicely they go with one another. And then we have the HGUC Gouf Flight Type. They're nearly identical in height and even in proportions, so perhaps that's an indication of how well they got it the first time around. With all that said, here's a Hobby Clubhouse 3-point verdict on the Bandai high-grade 1144 Gouf Flight Type from 1998. Number 1, it's beautiful enough to hide its age. I've talked a lot about this already, so I'm not going to go over all of it again, but it's really not hyperbole that the MVP of this kit is Katoki's design, and also the kit designers whose work shines even today so many years later. It can stand next to a modern kit and it's not going to get shown down on your shelf. And number 2, it's great for intermediate builders. This kit is a great project for builders who are confident in adding original details to a kit, but are not yet ready to make elaborate rebuilds like building an entire new waist. You can take it apart to sand without too many alterations, and the sculpt is already good enough that you don't have to do radical restyling, so you can focus on fixing up the exposed parts and paint it all up. It really has a lot of potential for a builder with intermediate skills, and it should be a lot of fun to work on. And number 3, it's still hard to buy. This may be a retail kit, but it's only reprinted occasionally, and worse yet, many American stores don't restock these kits as much, so unfortunately whether this kit is good or not is really more of an academic thing, because you can't just buy one whenever you feel like it. Maybe you're watching this because you see one for sale and you want to know if it's any good, and if that's the case, then yeah, go for it. For the rest of us, we can quietly resent Bandai for not making the new Flight Type a retail kit and making all of us fans pay out the nose for any version of this MS. I mean, come on Bandai, what the hell? So that's the review of the classic Gouf Flight Type, coming to us with all the limitations of its age, but somehow still good enough for a spot on a modern shelf. Thank you so much for watching. Come look us up on social media with updates on upcoming videos and sneak peeks at future projects. Links are in the description below. Or hang out here some more and watch the HGUC Gouf Flight Types' video. But before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified of new videos from Hobby Clubhouse, and I'll see you next time.